Hello and welcome to Raw Soul Medicine. This is my new channel, formerly Live with the Lights On. Guys, my name used to be Katie Bray. My channel used to be Live with the Lights On. Everything's changing. And this is a very candid video. I didn't even really know what I would look like or what would be happening in the background, but that's where things are. I'm actually sitting in the front of my yoga studio, Tejas Yoga and Wellness. We're in San Diego, southern San Diego, Chula Vista. But I wanted to just take some time to talk a little bit about this conversation that I started actually over on Facebook about a week ago. And I ended up getting quite a few comments, a lot of um, private messages, emails, text messages, just so much. And what I've been talking about is this process I've been going through of recovering from being in recovery. And when I say recovery, I mean a 12-step recovery. And I want to say, first and foremost, that there is so much that I owe the 12 steps and my time in recovery. And there's a lot that I have had to unravel and unlearn. And I really feel like it's become important for me to share about that. And I'm going to share about it as much as I feel like I need to, or as much as I feel like I'm getting the feedback that more people want to have this conversation. There's a lot that I want to talk about, even outside of this topic, but this is definitely a big one. So I just want to say, like, for those of you who don't know me, my background, I have always sort of held the story that I got sober in 1998 when I was 20 years old. And I'm 44 now. It is currently 2022. And over the years, I have, I don't know, my journey has taken me to a lot of different places, let's say. I stopped going to meetings after about 10 years of being in meetings regularly, and I was sponsoring people and doing the service work, and I had a sponsor. I was doing all the things. And there was this one day that I was driving to a noon meeting that I normally really, really loved and loved the people there. But if I was honest with myself, I noticed that there were things that just started to feel different for me when I would go to the rooms. And not different in that, like, I didn't have the pink cloud anymore that I used to have. I hadn't had that for years. But I noticed that, excuse me, as I was leaving the meetings, I wasn't feeling the way that I used to. It wasn't filling me up the way that it used to. And so this one day in particular, I was driving to this meeting and I heard a very clear voice say to me, turn the car around and go meditate in the woods. And there was this specific place that I loved to go and meditate, obviously in the woods. And I really felt it in that moment that I needed to go do this. So I turned around and started to go in the other direction. And I went to this place in the woods and I meditated and I felt amazing. And it was then that I realized that the 12 steps weren't for me anymore, the program wasn't for me anymore. And although I know that different areas and different regions have different ideas around what it looks like to leave the program, where I was, leaving the program meant, that I was basically a toxic person, that I was headed for relapse, that I was in denial, and I pretty much lost the majority of the relationships that I had because I was all of a sudden a really unsafe person. Interestingly, the two people who really stood beside me and really honored my choice was my sponsor and also my therapist at the time, because I had been talking to them about it. And they both said, like, we know you and we see you. And obviously, the rooms aren't going anywhere if you ever need to come back. Um, but they were really clear that I was of sound mind and I was making a very conscious decision. What I didn't know at the time that I recognize now is that I needed the 12 steps for the time that I was there. I needed the support of the group. I needed the disruption of basically leaning on alcohol and other external things. Because, I went in at a very young age, 20. But if we go back into more of my story, I actually started going to 12-step meetings when I was 9 years old with a relative, and I was there regularly. And I think at that young age, there was a lot that was sort of sinking into my consciousness that I didn't know at the time, of course, was becoming just a part of my regular self-concept and understanding. I just know that when I started going to those meetings when I was 9, that my life really changed. And that was because of the way it was affecting my mother. Um, and I felt really loved, and I felt the support of the community, and I felt the joy, and I felt the connection, and that was incredible for me. So it really left a huge impression on me. So what I started to come to, though, was, and this has been more, I'd say, in the last year, that there were elements of the 12 steps for me, or being, let's say, in community with where I was in community with the fellowship, where I was taking to heart some of the slogans and the sayings of, like, your best thinking got you here. You can't trust your mind because it's the one that has this disease or this virus. We never recover. We're always going to be sick, or we're always going to have this illness. But that felt to me like, okay, so I'm always going to be this sick person that can't trust herself. um, and I understand. So let me say this, like, my effort here is not to speak poorly about the 12 steps, because I feel like it does save lives, and there are people that, as there is, absolutely, this is where they belong. But I feel like there is a whole group of people that could use the support for a while. Um, and then my identity really needed to transition from being someone who was in recovery, because I had to start to learn that trusting myself and trusting my mind and trusting my intuition, now that I had created an internal foundation within myself, was the healing work that I needed to do. And that was not going to really be allowed in a place like the 12 steps, at least, again, in the region where I was, where it was very, very, very strict and, quite honestly, pretty dogmatic. Um, it didn't feel like there was space for me to trust myself in the way that I saw things and saw my perceptions, because there was always this idea that it was tainted somehow with this disease that I had. And I went into recovery after having suffered numerous, literally four in particular, traumatic events that happened within about a year and a half. Um, and I didn't have the internal foundation to deal with those things. And I think, really, as I look back, what I was looking at was, I didn't have the foundation. I didn't have the self-awareness. And again, granted, I was in my late teens into 20 when I went into recovery, but my late teens when I was really suffering. And I had PTSD. I was dealing with pretty significant post-traumatic stress disorder due to a sexual assault. Um, that was one of the traumas that I suffered. And so what I needed was to disrupt my pattern of addiction and looking for outside substances to numb what I was too afraid to feel. And I feel that in the time that I was in recovery, that's really a lot of the work that I was doing. I learned how to lean on myself, but I only learned how to lean on myself in the capacity that I had permission while being a part of this group that I was a part of. And I didn't realize how much shame I was carrying still leaving this group. Like it was my big dark secret when I would run into people or see people and they would ask me, "Oh, are you still going to meetings?" And I would say, "No, I haven't in a really long time." I never knew if I was going to be hit with judgment or understanding. Um, I know a lot of people said that it was like selfish that I didn't go, that I didn't stay so that I could keep giving back. But in my life, in my world, my entire existence is about giving back, is about being an example for people, being of service to people, supporting humanity in the ways that my soul feels called. And I felt very limited because I was so stuck or adhered to this identification or this label of being this recovering person. It wasn't giving me the freedom to really explore. Once I had that foundation, I couldn't explore who that really was. I had to stay within these certain confines or else, right? It was like, or you're in danger, or you might slip up and drink again, or do this again, or do that again. And, when I look at myself, I don't have an issue with self regulation at this point in my life. I really don't. So I don't identify as a recovering person anymore, which in a lot of places is incredibly taboo or toxic. But I don't. I mean, I also I don't drink, um, but I do use plant medicine. I have worked with sacred um, mushrooms on a number of occasions at this point, and I've done so for my spiritual development. It's not because, oh, I'm going to go do something and not feel myself. Something like mushrooms actually throws you so deeply into your reality. The last thing that I find there is that I can run from anything. It takes me right into the center of who I am and what isn't me. And it's actually part of how I have been able to do some of this work on sort of recovering from recovery, because what I see is that as much as I have learned to trust myself and value myself, I'm still I still find that I have moments where it's like, oh my God, can I even claim that I'm like this normal, healthy person? Even though intellectually I know that I am, the way that I live is really pretty healthy and put together. And yet I can feel this block inside of my body sometimes. It's still just like, ooh, don't go there. That's dangerous. And I have to sort of confront it and acknowledge that that's not the truth of who I am. That's part of the programming that was sort of given to me. And I understand, again, the programming is given to some people. I can think right off the top of my head of a few people that if they stopped going to meetings, they very, very well might start using again. I know that that is true for certain people. For me, I'm not one of those people. And so where I am is continuing to unravel these programmed things that were given to me starting at the age of 9. Again, I'm 44, that for a long time, I never questioned, right? I mean, anything that we do long enough becomes our normal, to the point where we don't see anything outside of its context. And that's what can be really tricky about things like this, and really tricky about any kind of belief, is that it's so normal to us to a certain capacity that it's hard to see beyond it. It's like talking to a fish about swimming in water and a fish being like, what water? Right? That has been my experience until I'd say the last little over a year. Well, longer than a year, because I've been unraveling this for a while, but I really, since I had my first plant medicine journey a little over a year ago, really have learned like, wow, there's a lot that I took on to be a part of a certain group that has cult like tendencies. where with again the group where I was around. There's definitely cult-like tendencies. And I feel that I actually got harmed by those. And I feel that in many ways it was sort of what was trying to keep me sick and keep me dependent on something other than learning how to trust myself and develop a deeper relationship with myself and a higher power, God, universe, spirit, whatever you want to call it. um, so I will be talking more and more about this. I have so much to share about it, because there's a lot to be said about it. And I think that, a lot of old structures are starting to collapse. And this is an old structure, and it will still work for plenty of people just fine. There are a lot of people that the old structures, 12 steps included, we're finding are not working anymore. And it's critical that we lean on our own internal intelligence, the organic intelligence that is already a part of us, that we develop a relationship with it. I personally feel like having a relationship with something higher than ourselves, that's for me, that's my saving grace. It's part of how I check in with myself. Um, so that's just for me. But most old structures' job is to pull us away from ourselves. It is a programming or programs that hijack us so that they can live on in the way that they want to live on. And most of them have an element of fear. I know that was what I experienced in the 12 steps. And again, I understand why, because for many people, they go to the 12 steps because their life depends on it. So you can't sort of tiptoe around that. In my experience, though, there was sort of an expiration date that I hit, and the unfortunate way that I was treated after I left really sucked and really hurt. Um, and was very much that old paradigm structure of fear, 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 fear. But I find that the more and more I am in the essence of who I am, the amount of fearlessness that I experience is incredible. And that's what allows me to lean in more on myself and look at these old structures and see them for what they are, and see them for things that are really meant to just be something that makes me externalize my power rather than bringing my power here and projecting it out in a way that's productive and useful for me in the way that I want to build my life. And for me, my life is about um, being the healthiest version of myself so that I can support others in doing the same. There's a huge mission that I have behind me that my husband and I do, even in this yoga studio. It's so much bigger than this yoga studio. But our experience of being in this yoga studio is so that we can help people lean in on their own truth and to not externalize their power in the way that we are often taught, because that is the epitome of self-abandonment. And there are so many ways that we are asked to abandon ourselves in the world today. And so my big call to action for myself, for you, for anyone that I'm around is, how do I consistently come back home to myself if I have left? When I externalize my power, how do I bring myself back? And how do I bring myself back faster? And how do I stay at home in myself longer? Because I think that's really, honestly, the biggest problem in the world right now is we have all been trained very well how to self-abandon. And the minute that more of us stop abandoning ourselves, the better the world's going to be and the healthier we will be. And the more we will be able to serve humanity just by being open hearted, compassionate, loving, healthy people who are about raising other people up and raising the world up, even if it's in the littlest ways, because we are all significant. We are all here for a reason. There is not anyone here that is here by mistake. And we have an impact even in the smallest, most intimate moments of our life. And I think it's important that we never forget that. And we don't ever let anyone take that away from us or make us think that there is something inherently wrong with us. Because the minute that that becomes a baseline belief, we start to lose ourselves by externalizing our power in the things that are telling us that they are more powerful than us, or that we get our power from that thing. That's when we lose it, and that's when the wheels start to come off. So I know this is a controversial topic. Um, I'm happy to hear your thoughts, your experiences, anything you would want me to touch on. I'm going to be speaking more about it, like I said. Um, throwing off the old structures, the old paradigms. That's where it's at. So thank you for sitting here with me and spending this time on this very spontaneous video. I'm actually about to go to the gym and then get back to work, but I just wanted to just drop this in and welcome you to my new channel. Yeah, comment, subscribe, like, share, do all the things. Let's start a conversation about this. I am Sita, and I love you, and I see you, and let me know if I can support you in any way.